The alien's 3 yellow eyes blinked rapidly in fear. Commander Zirak of the Zalcor Dominion had never known terror like this. His chitinous exoskeleton shuddered involuntarily as he stared at the human marine sitting across from him. The alien had fought dozens of species before. He had seen planets burn. He had commanded fleets that crushed entire civilizations beneath the might of the Dominion. But never had he encountered a race so wrong. The Marine's blood-stained armor was scratched and dented, the remnants of the boarding assault that had left the Zalcor warship crippled. His helmet sat on the table between them, revealing a scarred human face, expression unreadable. The human leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, a slow, deliberate smirk forming. "All right, Bug," the Marine said, his voice low and predatory. "Let's go over this one more time." Zirak's mandibles clicked anxiously. I do not understand what you wish to know." The Marine tilted his head slightly, amused. "Sure you do. You called us primitive. You called us barbaric. You thought attacking our colonies would be easy." Zirak flinched. The Marine's expression darkened. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "But then," he said, "you found out about us." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Zirak swallowed hard. The Dominion had assumed humanity was weak, just another upstart race of soft-bodied, warm-blooded primitives who would fold at the first display of force. Their fleets had arrived in the Sol system expecting surrender. Instead, they had found warships on fire, soldiers who fought like demons, and a species that did not fear death. The Dominion had lost half its fleet in 3 hours. And now, Zirak, the highest-ranking Zalcor officer still alive, was sitting across from a human marine who smelled of blood and gunpowder. Zirak's mandibles clicked nervously. Your people fight without honor. You do not abide by the rules of war." The Marine grinned. "Buddy, that's where you're wrong. We love rules of war." He leaned in closer. "In fact, we wrote most of them." Zirak's eyes widened. The Marine's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "Ever heard of the Geneva Conventions?" Zirak shook his head quickly. The Marine sighed, shaking his head. "See, that's the problem with you Dominion types. You think war is about who has the biggest fleet, who can flex the hardest." He leaned back, stretching, casually wiping blood from his gauntlet. "But us? We don't fight for glory. We don't fight for conquest." His grin sharpened. "We fight to win." Zirak stayed completely still. The Marine gestured lazily. "So, back to the Geneva Conventions. It's this old set of rules we came up with back on Earth. Basically, we all agreed that some things are just too fucked up to do in war. No biological weapons, no shooting civilians, no torching whole cities just for fun." Zirak narrowed his eyes. "You limit yourselves? You impose restrictions?" The Marine chuckled. "That's the funny part, Bug. We do. But when someone else..." His eyes locked onto Zirak's. "Doesn't..." The grin vanished. "Then, we stop holding back." The silence was deafening. Zirak felt his exoskeleton tremble involuntarily. You mean..." The Marine exhaled. "You ever wonder why we've got so many rules about war? It's because we had to." He tapped his fingers on the table, once, twice, 3 times. "See, Earth had wars before, big ones, and every time we learned new ways to kill each other. Napalm, nerve gas, carpet bombing, orbital strikes, mass starvation, nuclear winter." He shrugged. "Eventually, we decided there had to be some limits. But..." His eyes darkened. "When some alien bug bastards show up and start glassing colonies, taking prisoners for experiments, enslaving civilians..." The Marine smiled. "Then the rules don't apply anymore." Zirak froze. You You would not dare. The Dominion. Our laws. The Marine laughed, a slow, unsettling laugh. You still don't get it, do you? He tapped the table again, this time deliberately. We invented war crimes, Bug. Jirac's breath hitched. The Marine leaned in, whispering, and if you keep pushing us, his voice turned ice cold. You're gonna find out what happens when we stop caring about them. The alien stared at him, frozen in horror. A long silence. Then, the door slammed open. A second Marine stepped inside, her armor dented and splattered with something dark. She gave the first Marine a grin and a nod. Sir, orders from command. The fleet is clear to engage. The first Marine stood up, cracking his knuckles. Guess that's my cue. He turned back to Zirac. I'd wish you luck, but His smirk returned. You're gonna need a hell of a lot more than that. Admiral Ethan Rourke stood on the bridge of the UNSC Relentless, staring at the holotable. The Dominion fleet was twice their size. Sleek, organic warships, their dark hulls reflecting no light. Their weapons were more advanced, their shielding superior. But none of that mattered, because humans didn't fight fair. Status, Rourke said, voice calm. All battle groups reporting ready, sir. His XO, Commander Vasquez, replied. The Dominion are holding position. They still think we're going to negotiate. Rourke exhaled. Poor bastards. The Zalcor didn't understand yet. They thought war was a matter of numbers, firepower, and honor. Humans had learned long ago that war was a matter of survival. Vasquez smirked. Fleet Command wants your go-ahead, sir. Rourke nodded. Send it. The first strike. The Dominion fleet moved into formation, their elegant warships gliding into a battle line. They were still waiting, expecting the humans to open a comm channel. Instead, the first human war crime of the battle hit them at 3,500 meters per second. From the shattered hull of a damaged UNSC frigate, hundreds of solid tungsten rods launched from the ship's hidden cargo bays. Kinetic impactors moving at orbital drop speeds. No energy signature, no warning. The Zalcor shields didn't even register them as a threat. The Dominion barely had time to react before 4 warships exploded instantly. Their hulls turned into glowing shrapnel by hypersonic impacts. The remaining Zalcor ships recoiled, their formations breaking. That was when the main fleet fired. Orbital slaughter. The UNSC, Relentless, fired first. Its spinal railgun sent a 50-ton ferric tungsten slug roaring through the void, impacting the Dominion's command battleship at half the speed of light. The battleship vanished in a blinding explosion. No shielding system in the galaxy could withstand pure kinetic hate. Direct hit, a lieutenant shouted. Enemy flagship destroyed. Vasquez grinned. Hell of an opening shot, Admiral. Rourke didn't smile. Keep firing. The rest of the human fleet engaged. Missile swarms streaked toward their targets, each warhead packed with AI-driven evasion patterns. Orbital bombardment cannons deployed, unleashing multi-kiloton cluster munitions. Covert insertion pods launched. Dozens of them. Marine kill squads deploying behind enemy lines. The Dominion finally started to return fire. Violet plasma beams lancing through the dark. A human destroyer exploded. Another frigate broke apart. But it didn't matter, because humanity had already dictated the tempo of battle. Make them pay. Dominion carrier. Varek, Zalcor command. Ship Commander Zirac watched in horror as his fleet was shattered. How? He rasped. The humans weren't fighting like any other species. They weren't matching formations. They weren't honoring the battle line. They were ambushing, backstabbing, flanking, and overwhelming. They were cheating. A Dominion officer spoke, panicked. Commander, their troops have boarded our ship. The doors exploded. Through the smoke and fire, 3 armored figures stepped in. Zirac froze. human Marines. The one in front had a blood-stained knife in one hand and an M95 assault rifle in the other. His helmet's visor burned red. "Hi," the Marine said casually. "We're here to discuss the Geneva Conventions." Girac reached for his sidearm. The Marine shot him twice in the chest. The hallway was a charnel house. Bodies of Zalcor warriors lay sprawled across the deck, black ichor pooling beneath them. The walls were scorched from pulse rifle fire, and the air reeked of burning flesh, ozone, and gunpowder. Sergeant Mason Carter reloaded his rifle with a loud clack. The red glow of his helmet visor reflected off the blood-slicked floor. Behind him, his fire team moved like wraiths. "Clear left! Clear right!" The Marines advanced, weapons raised, no hesitation. Somewhere ahead, alien shrieks echoed down the corridor. The surviving Zalcor were regrouping. Mason smirked. "Let 'em try. This isn't war. This is slaughter." Dominion Command Center. Commander Girac's 3 hearts were hammering in his chest. The battle was over. He knew it. Everyone knew it. The human fleet had shattered their warships, overrun their defenses, and now they were here. Aboard his own goddamn command ship. He gripped the edge of the command table, mandibles clicking in horror. How are they doing this? His second-in-command, Captain Vekar, stared at the security feeds, his 4 compound eyes wide with disbelief. "Sir, they are not taking prisoners." Girac turned sharply. "What?" Vekar swallowed hard. He pointed to the monitor, where a squad of human soldiers was systematically executing every surviving Dominion warrior. Some Zalcor tried to surrender. It didn't matter. The humans cut them down anyway. Girac's exoskeleton trembled. That's barbaric!" A new voice cut through the room. "No," the Marine at the doorway said. "That's war." The entire command center whipped around. The human stood casually in the doorway, his rifle slung over one shoulder. His armor was drenched in alien blood. Sergeant Mason Carter smiled beneath his visor. "Hey, Bugs." Girac reached for his pulse pistol. Mason moved first. 3 shots, center mass. Girac crashed backward, gurgling. Vekar screamed, "Please, we surrender!" Mason cocked his head. "Oh, do you?" Vekar nodded frantically. We didn't know. We didn't know what your kind was. We thought you were just another primitive race." Mason chuckled darkly. "Yeah, that's the thing, Bug. We get that a lot." He raised his rifle. Vekar's mandibles trembled. Wait. There are rules in war. You have laws. You must accept." Mason's grin widened. "Buddy, we aren't breaking any laws." His visor flashed red. "We're just not holding back anymore." Bang. "The war is already over. They just don't know it yet." UNSC. Relentless. Bridge. "Sir, we're getting reports from the Marine units aboard the Varek," Vasquez said. "The command center is secured. All enemy leadership is dead." Admiral Rourke nodded. "Good. What about the fleet?" "Dominion forces are retreating, but poorly. Their formations are broken. They weren't ready for this kind of engagement." Rourke exhaled. They never were. The Dominion had come here expecting humanity to surrender. Instead, they had learned exactly what happened when you pissed off a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. Rourke turned to his weapons officer. "Target the retreating ships." The officer hesitated. "Sir, they're fleeing." Rourke's gaze was ice cold. Not fast enough. Overlord Kajir sat frozen in his throne, his mandibles twitching in pure terror. The holographic display before him showed the remains of the Dominion's once mighty fleet. Charred wreckage, shattered hulls, and drifting debris filled the sector where thousands of Zalcor warriors had once stood victorious. Not anymore. Now, there was only silence. and the humans. Kajir's blood ran cold. How could this happen? The Dominion had stood for over 10,000 cycles. They had crushed countless species, conquered empires, wiped civilizations from the stars. And now, in a single battle, they had been brought to their knees. A nervous officer approached cautiously. "Oh, Overlord, the fleet." Kajir snapped his gaze toward him. "Say it." The officer hesitated, then spoke. "The fleet is gone, my lord. There are no survivors." Kajir's claws dug into his throne. He felt his vision blur. His species had never lost like this. Not just defeat, annihilation. The humans had not simply won. They had broken the Dominion. And now, they were coming here. Kajir turned to his war council, his voice a strained whisper. "What do we do?" Silence. No one had an answer. Then, a new voice cut through the room. "You should surrender." Every Zalcor in the war room whipped around. A single human figure stood in the doorway. Impossible. The alien guards reacted instantly, raising weapons. Too late. The human's pistol barked twice. Two Zalcor warriors collapsed, ichor spraying from their skulls. The room froze. The human holstered his weapon casually, stepping forward. His black armor was scratched and dented, his helmet still clipped to his belt. His face was marked with old scars, his eyes cold and unreadable. A single Marine. Yet Kajir felt as if he were staring at an extinction-level event. The Marine stopped a few feet from the Overlord's throne. He stared at the High Command, at the rulers of a dying empire. Then, he spoke. "You called us primitive." Kajir swallowed hard. "You thought we didn't understand war." The Marine's smile didn't reach his eyes. "So we showed you what war really is." Kajir felt a shiver run through his carapace. He had spent his entire life believing the Dominion was untouchable, that no species could stand against them. But humans didn't fight like anyone else. They didn't fight for honor. They didn't fight for conquest. They fought to win. Kajir's voice shook. You want us to surrender?" The Marine exhaled slowly, as if thinking. "Not really." Kajir's mandibles twitched. Then, What do you want?" The Marine tilted his head. Then, in a calm, measured voice, he said, "Everything. Let the galaxy burn. Location, Zalcor orbit, UNSC 3rd Fleet." Admiral Rourke watched from the bridge of the Relentless as the first wave of orbital strikes hit the surface. Brilliant fireballs erupted across the capital. Shockwaves flattened entire cities. The Dominion's final stronghold was burning. The war was over, and humanity had won. Rourke turned to his weapons officer. "Begin Phase 2. "Aye, sir." Down below, drop pods screamed through the atmosphere, hundreds of them. The Marines were going in to finish the job. The capital city burned. Columns of black smoke curled into the sky, choking the atmosphere. The once pristine spires of the Zalcor homeworld lay shattered, their structures reduced to smoking ruins. Fires raged across the landscape, turning the sky into an apocalyptic orange haze. And through the wreckage and corpses, the Marines advanced. Sergeant Mason Carter stepped over the body of a dead Zalcor officer, his boots crunching through the charred remains of alien armor. His squad moved in perfect formation, rifles raised, helmet visors flashing crimson. The resistance was laughable. Zalcor warriors, once proud conquerors of 100 species, were reduced to scattered pockets of survivors, firing blindly down the streets as they retreated in terror. Mason's squad didn't slow. Suppressive fire. Light 'em up! A storm of high-velocity rounds tore through the air. Aliens screamed and died. They weren't fighting soldiers anymore. They were hunting survivors. "This isn't a battle. It's an extermination!" Zalcor Central Command. Bunker Overlord Kajir, clutched his head, mandibles twitching in horror. The humans had breached every defensive line. They had shattered his armies. His homeworld, his empire, was in flames. They hadn't come to conquer. They had come to erase. A young officer stumbled into the room, bleeding from his side. "My lord, we must evacuate. The humans, they're already inside the bunker perimeter." Kazir's eyes snapped to the security monitors, the last holovid footage of his empire. Zalcor warriors, elite bodyguards, heavily armed, held the final barricades at the bunker entrance for 3 seconds. Then the walls exploded. A dozen human Marines stormed through the smoke, precision gunfire cutting through the defenders like wheat. Grenades sailed through the air, detonating with concussive fury. His strongest warriors fell like insects. Kazir staggered back. It was over. The bunker doors slammed open, and through the fire and dust, a single Marine stepped inside. "Burn it to the ground!" The Marine's boots echoed against the metal floor. His rifle was lowered, relaxed, because he wasn't worried. Kazir, overlord of the Dominion, master of war, ruler of 1,000 fleets, stared at the human like a trapped animal. "You," Kazir whispered, "you could have asked for surrender." The Marine tilted his head. "You could have left us alone." Kazir's mandibles trembled. You are worse than monsters." The Marine smiled. "I know." Kazir reached for his weapon. The Marine shot him in the head. A single, clean kill. No ceremony, no hesitation, no mercy. Kazir collapsed. The Dominion was dead. The Marine exhaled, stepping over the corpse. He tapped his comms. "Target neutralized. Command, we're done here." A pause. Then, "Understood. Begin final cleansing protocol." The Marine glanced at the holotable, still displaying the city. He activated his visor, HUD. Down in the streets, Marine squads were marking key infrastructure points: hospitals, government sectors, industrial zones. Not for preservation, for demolition. Admiral Rourke watched as the final phase began. Tactical bombers screamed through the atmosphere, releasing high-yield incendiary payloads. Missile barrages flattened entire city districts. The Dominion's capital, the heart of their empire, was reduced to a sea of fire and ash. No negotiations, no diplomacy, just total annihilation. Vasquez exhaled. Jesus. Rourke didn't blink. Never again. The Dominion would never threaten humanity again. They weren't just defeated. They were erased. The council chamber was silent. Representatives from over a dozen interstellar civilizations sat in a vast circular room, their holographic displays flickering with the latest reports from Zalcor Prime. The footage was brutal. The Dominion capital, once a sprawling metropolis, was now nothing more than ash. Skyscrapers turned to molten slag. Entire sectors burned until there was nothing left but blackened ruins. And the humans had left nothing standing. Even the Dominion's genetic archives, breeding centers, and historical records were wiped out. Not only had humanity defeated them, but they had erased their culture, their history, the very memory of their existence. The Zalcor Dominion, once one of the most feared empires in the galaxy, no longer existed, and the other species were terrified. The silence stretched. Finally, High Chancellor Virex of the Valray Ascendancy spoke, his voice unsteady. This is not war," he whispered. "This is extinction." The other council members stirred. "They showed no mercy," growled a representative of the Zeeth Collective, their bioluminescent tendrils shifting anxiously. "No surrender was accepted, no quarter was given." "They did not simply conquer," muttered the Trellian ambassador, a reptilian creature with dark, unblinking eyes. "They cleansed." Virex looked up. What are the humans?" No one had an answer, because no one knew anymore. Deep within the shadows of galactic politics, another meeting was taking place. Admirals, spy masters, and intelligence officers from the most powerful empires in the known universe sat around a dimly lit war room, watching the same footage. Unlike the Council, they did not speak in horror. They spoke in fear. "They have no interest in ruling," said Director Hask of the Zanari Syndicate. "They didn't conquer the Dominion. They didn't enslave them. They simply," he gestured at the display, "removed them." "They did not even take the planet," muttered a strategist from the Jakar hierarchy. "They destroyed it and left." The room was tense. For centuries, the galaxy had operated under certain unspoken rules. Empires rose and fell. Wars were fought, but in the end, diplomacy always returned. Peace was always negotiated. But the humans, they didn't negotiate. They didn't conquer. They eradicated. A grim-faced warlord folded his hands. "If humanity decides we are a threat, what do you think will happen?" No one answered, because they all knew. Admiral Rourke stood before the holographic display, watching the classified reports come in. The Galactic Council was panicking. Good. He turned to his officers, hands clasped behind his back. "We are now the most feared species in the galaxy," he said. No one spoke. "They don't understand us. They don't know our limits. And that uncertainty?" He exhaled slowly. "That is our greatest weapon." A pause. Then Vasquez grinned. "So what's our next move, sir?" Rourke turned back to the display, his eyes cold as the void. "We wait," he smiled. "And we let them fear." The chamber was cold and silent. Around the massive circular war table, the most powerful leaders in the galaxy gathered in secrecy. They were not diplomats. They were not politicians. They were survivors. The Zanari Syndicate, the Jakar Hierarchy, the Val Ray Ascendancy, the Zeeth Collective. Each had once believed they were untouchable. Each had ruled their own slice of the galaxy for centuries, unchecked. But now they shared a common enemy: humanity. The Zalcor had been a warning. The Dominion had not simply lost a war. They had been erased from existence. Their entire species had been systematically wiped out. The message was clear: challenge humanity, and you don't just lose, you disappear. The Council could not let that happen again. A Valrai spy master leaned forward, his bioluminescent skin pulsing nervously. "We must act now. The humans are not expanding, but they are watching, waiting. We have to assume they are preparing for war." A Zanari admiral, her cybernetic implants flickering, nodded. "I agree. They move with terrifying efficiency. They do not conquer. They do not rule. They eliminate." "Then we must strike first," growled a Jakar warlord. His scaled fist slammed against the table. "Before they do it to us." The room fell into uneasy silence. Finally, a Zith intelligence officer spoke, voice a whisper. "We have an alternative." The others turned toward him. The Zeth's tendrils coiled anxiously. "There is a faction within humanity. A group that does not agree with their high command's methods." A hologram flickered to life, showing a group of humans, heavily armed, operating outside UNSC control. "Rebels?" the Zanari admiral asked. The Zeeth shook his head. "Worse. They are extremists. They believe the UNSC is too merciful." The room went still. The spy master narrowed his eyes. "Explain." The Zeeth officer's voice was quiet. "They do not believe in winning wars." He paused. "They believe humanity should rule the galaxy." Admiral Rourke read the intelligence report carefully. His expression was unreadable. Across the table, ONI Director Evelyn Graves leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "It's confirmed. she said. "There's a rogue faction within the Colonial Defense Forces. They've gone dark, disavowed by High Command. They call themselves the Imperium Initiative." Rourke's jaw tightened. "What do they want?" Graves exhaled. "Total dominance." The silence was heavy. "Shit," Vasquez muttered. Rourke closed the report. "How bad is it?" Graves's expression darkened. "They're not just ex-military. They have ships, resources, and support from off-world human colonies. We estimate their numbers in the hundreds of thousands, maybe more." "They believe Earth is weak," Vasquez guessed. Graves nodded. "They believe we didn't go far enough with the Dominion, that we should have expanded, that we should rule." Rourke's fists clenched. "And the aliens?" Graves hesitated. "Our intelligence suggests the Imperium Initiative has already made contact with the Galactic Council's War Council." The war room froze. Vasquez swore. "Tell me you're joking." Graves shook her head. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and right now, the Imperium Initiative is promising them a future without the UNSC." Rourke stood, his expression turning to steel. "Then we eliminate them," he said. "The war for humanity's soul begins." Location: unknown system. Imperium Initiative. Warship Tyrant. General Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the Tyrant, watching the fleet assemble. Not human, not entirely. The ships belonged to alien empires that had once feared humanity. Now they had found common cause. Kane smiled. "This galaxy belongs to us," he said quietly. Beside him, a Zenari admiral stood, her cybernetic eyes scanning the battle reports. "You understand, General Kane, that if you fail, the UNSC will wipe you from existence." Kane chuckled. "Let them try." The alien narrowed her eyes. "What makes you so confident?" Kane's smile widened. "Because unlike the UNSC," he said, "we aren't just willing to fight dirty." He turned, staring at the hollow display of Earth. "We're willing to burn it all down." Director Evelyn Graves had been through a lifetime of dirty wars. She had seen aliens tear through human colonies, had watched entire planets die, and had personally signed orders for operations that the public would never know about. But this was something worse, because this time, the enemy was human. Graves lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly as she stared out of the armored viewport. Below, Earth rotated in the darkness of space. Blue, peaceful, unaware. They didn't know. They didn't know that right now, somewhere out in the void, a fleet of their own kind was preparing to burn it all down. Her private terminal beeped. She tapped the screen. A single message appeared. "Imperium Initiative activity detected. Attack imminent." Her pulse quickened. Shit. They're moving. Location: UNSC Relentless. Flagship of the 3rd Fleet. Time 05:15. UTC Admiral Rourke sat in the war room, staring at the latest tactical reports. Every alien empire was watching. Every galactic superpower was waiting. And somewhere out there, a human fleet that should not exist was preparing to fire the first shot. Vasquez spoke first. "Sir, our recon probes just confirmed fleet activity in the Proxima system. It's them." Rourke's fist clenched. "Numbers." "Heavy," Vasquez admitted. 30 warships, ex-UNSC hulls, retrofits. Looks like they've even integrated alien tech. Rourke's eyes darkened. "So they aren't just traitors." Vasquez nodded grimly. "They're evolving." Rourke leaned back in his chair. "How soon until they move?" Vasquez hesitated. Then, "They already have." A red warning light flashed across the hollow table. A new alert. New intelligence. Graves's voice came through the encrypted comms. "We just lost contact with the UNSC High Chancellor's convoy." The room froze. "It's them. Execute the plan." The attack was swift, precise, surgical. The High Chancellor's personal diplomatic escort, a formation of 5 UNSC ships, had been traveling through the Alpha Centauri corridor en route to a classified emergency summit. The Imperium Initiative had known. They had waited. And the moment the escort fleet exited FTL, they struck. Covert warships decloaked, jamming communications. Torpedoes fired from the dark, cutting through shields before alarms even sounded. Boarding craft slammed into the Chancellor's vessel, dozens of black-armored shock troopers pouring in. The escort ships fought back, but it wasn't enough. In less than 6 minutes, the UNSC fleet was reduced to burning wreckage. And as the Imperium forces dragged the High Chancellor from the ruins of his flagship, General Marcus Kane watched from his command deck. He turned to his officers. "Send the message," Kane said. The officer nodded. A single encrypted transmission was sent toward Earth. Its contents were simple. The UNSC is weak. Humanity needs leaders willing to do what must be done. You have 48 hours to surrender Earth to the Imperium, or we take it. The war for Earth begins. The war room was chaos. Reports were flying in from across the fleet. The Chancellor had been taken. The Imperium was mobilizing. And worst of all, some UNSC colonies were openly supporting them. Humanity was about to fight itself. Admiral Rourke stood, stone-faced. "Deploy the Third Fleet," he ordered. Vasquez's eyes widened. "We're really doing this. We're fighting our own?" Rourke exhaled. "They made that choice for us." Vasquez hesitated. "And if they won't surrender?" Rourke's expression turned cold. "Then we show them what happens to traitors." The lights inside the war room were dim. A dozen hardened soldiers stood in silence, their black armor marked with no insignia, no unit designations. Because officially, this mission didn't exist. Sergeant Mason Carter stood at the front, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Across from him, Director Evelyn Graves exhaled slowly. "You all know why you're here," Graves said. Carter smirked. "Because you need someone crazy enough to pull off a suicide oppie?" Graves's eyes darkened. "We just received confirmation," she said. "The Imperium is holding the High Chancellor on a rogue colony world, Erebus 4. The room went still. Carter's expression shifted. "You've got to be kidding me." Erebus 4 was deep in Imperium-controlled space. The system was surrounded by advanced orbital defenses, ground-to-air cannons, and an entire garrison of shock troopers. A direct assault was impossible, which meant they had to go in the hard way. Stealth, infiltration, extraction. Graves looked at Carter. "You get one dropship, one shot. You either get him out or don't come back." Carter grinned. "Finally, the challenge. Drop pods incoming." Location, Erebus 4, upper atmosphere. Time, 2:15. Local time, nightfall. The stealth dropship cut through the dark, invisible to enemy scanners. Inside, Carter and his team locked in. The plan was simple. One orbital drop from 40,000 feet. No one would see them coming. 2 silent insertion into the capital city. Locate the Chancellor. 4 extract before the Imperium realizes they're there. Carter's helmet HUD flickered. He tapped his comms. "Mission is green. Execute drop." The rear hatch hissed open. The wind howled. Then, Carter jumped. "Welcome to hell." Location, Erebus 4, surface time 0232. Local time. The drop pods slammed into the city streets, silent as ghosts. Carter pushed the hatch open, stepping out into the shadows. The air was hot, heavy with tension. Erebus 4 was one of the Imperium's core worlds, an industrial hub turned military stronghold. Everywhere, soldiers marched. Patrols moved in tight formations. Towers scanned the skies. Carter tapped his comm. "We're in, moving to Phase 2. The team melted into the darkness. The hunt had begun. Sergeant Mason Carter moved like a shadow. His squad advanced through the steel corridors of the detention complex, their black armor blending into the darkness. No alarms, no guards. It was too easy. And that bothered him. "Where the hell is everyone?" Private Santos muttered. Carter tapped his comms. "Vulture, you reading anything on thermals?" The sniper's voice crackled over the link. "Negative, Sarge. Whole damn building's cold, no patrols, no defenses, nothing." Carter's jaw clenched. Shit. This was wrong. The Imperium had executed precision strikes, hijacked warships, assassinated high-ranking officials. They weren't stupid. So why was their most valuable hostage completely unguarded? Carter signaled his team. "Stay sharp. This reeks of a trap." Found him. Detention level. Cell block Alpha. The cell doors hissed open. Carter stepped inside. His rifle stayed raised, safety off. There, sitting in the center of the cold metal room, was High Chancellor Elias Harlow. Bruised, bloodied, alive. Harlow's head tilted up slowly, his eyes, sharp despite his injuries, locked onto Carter. "You took your damn time," Harlow rasped. Carter smirked. Traffic was bad. He tapped his comms. Package secured, moving to extraction. That was when the lights flickered. Then the alarm hit. Santos cursed. "Oh, you gotta be..." The doors slammed shut. A new voice boomed over the intercom. "We've been expecting you." Carter froze. "Checkmate." Location: Imperium High Command 4 Room, Erebus 4. General Marcus Kane watched the live feed, arms crossed, a slow smirk forming. The UNSC thought they were clever, thought they could sneak onto his planet, steal his hostage, and walk away unscathed. Pathetic. Kane turned to his officers. "Seal the facility, lock down the exits, deploy shock troopers to every corridor." A communications officer hesitated. "Sir, shouldn't we interrogate them? Capture them alive?" Kane's smirk widened. "No." He turned back to the screen, watching the trapped Marines. "Kill them all. No way out." Location: Detention Complex, Hallway, Kilo 4. The first wave of Imperium troopers hit fast. Carter's squad barely had time to react before plasma fire rained down the corridor. "Ambush!" Santos yelled, diving for cover. Red warning lights strobed. Smoke filled the air. The sound of boots, shouting, and weapons fire drowned out everything else. Carter gritted his teeth. "Vulture! We're compromised. Need a goddamn exit now!" The sniper's voice crackled through comms. "Exit's cut off. They've locked the entire complex down," Carter cursed. He turned to his men. "Then we fight our way out." The entire complex shook as another detonation rocked the hallway. Sergeant Mason Carter dived behind a column as a fresh wave of plasma fire tore through the air. The corridor was a kill zone, and the Imperium troops weren't holding back. "Keep moving!" Carter barked, firing 2 precise shots down the corridor. A black-armored Imperium trooper collapsed, head snapping back. Private Santos slid into cover beside him, cursing. "They're flooding the hallways. We need another exit." Carter tapped his comms. "Vulture, tell me you got a goddamn door for us." The sniper's voice came in, tense. "Negative. Imperium forces have locked every blast door. We got troopers on all floors, automated turrets, and..." The comm cut to static. Then, a new voice, cold, unfamiliar. "UNSC forces," the voice said, "surrender now, and we will allow you to die quickly. Resist, and we will make you beg for it." Carter gritted his teeth. "Oh, yeah?" He raised his rifle and blind-fired a grenade down the hall. Boom! Screams. Fire! The Imperium troops scrambled for cover. Carter grinned. "Come take us, assholes." "Burn them out." Location: Imperium Command Center, Erebus 4. General Marcus Kane stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the live feed. The UNSC strike team was pinned down, outnumbered, cut off. They had no chance. "Gas them," Kane ordered. A lieutenant hesitated. "Sir?" Kane's gaze hardened. "I said gas them. Fill every vent, every corridor. If they don't suffocate, they'll burn." The lieutenant saluted sharply. "Yes, sir." Seconds later, the order was executed. A hissing sound filled the detention complex, and then the fire suppression system activated. A thick mist sprayed from the vents, but it wasn't water. It was white phosphorus. "If we're dying, we're taking them with us." Location: detention complex. Main hallway. Carter smelled it before he saw it. The air turned sharp. Chemical. Wrong. His HUD flashed red. Toxic warning. "Masks on," he shouted, pulling his rebreather over his face. The mist burned through the air. A few Imperium soldiers were too slow. The first scream came seconds later, then the next, and the next. The gas turned to fire, igniting on contact with oxygen. The hallways became a hellscape. Imperium troops fell, screaming as their armor melted onto their skin. The Imperium had planned to burn them out. Instead, they had set their own men on fire. "Go! Move now!" Carter roared, grabbing the Chancellor and hauling him forward. The team rushed into the inferno. The air was poison. Sergeant Mason Carter gritted his teeth, dragging the High Chancellor through the inferno as his team fired blindly into the smoke. They weren't even aiming anymore. They were killing anything that moved. The hallway behind them was a mass grave. Imperium soldiers screaming, burning, choking. Some tried to run, their armor melting into their flesh. Others fired blindly through the white phosphorus haze, desperate to hit something before the fire took them. None of it mattered. Carter's team kept moving. And then they saw light. "Exit up ahead!" Santos shouted. Carter felt relief for the first time in hours. He tapped his comms. "Vulture! We're at the evac zone! Where the hell are you?" The response came instantly. "Sarge, it's a trap." Carter froze. And then the doors blew inward. "You're not leaving alive." Location: evacuation site, Bravo, detention complex exterior. The first thing Carter saw was the tanks. 3 Imperium HAV-22 hover tanks sat parked outside the complex, their cannons aimed directly at the exit. The second thing he saw was the battalion. Over 300 Imperium shock troopers waited, their rifles raised. The last thing Carter saw was General Marcus Kane. The Imperium commander stood at the center of it all, his black armor streaked with ash, his eyes locked onto Carter like a predator watching prey. Kane tilted his head. "You actually made it this far." Carter tightened his grip on his rifle. "Yeah? And you actually thought you could take Earth?" Kane smirked. "I still do." Then he raised his hand. "Kill them. If we're dying, so are you." Location: detention complex exit, UNSC, last stand. The entire battalion opened fire. The tanks roared to life, and Carter did the only thing he could. He charged. "Hit 'em hard!" he bellowed, sprinting forward. His team followed without hesitation. Frag grenades sailed through the air. Suppressive fire tore into Imperium formations. A rocket streaked across the battlefield. One of the hover tanks detonated in a fireball. They shouldn't have lasted 5 seconds. But they weren't normal soldiers. They were Marines. And Marines don't quit. No one escapes. Location: Imperium. High Command. War Room, Erebus 4. Kane watched the battle with amusement. "They think they can fight their way out," he muttered. Pathetic. A technician turned. "Sir, we just intercepted a transmission. They called for evac." Kane smiled. "Good." He tapped his comms. "Send the intercept fleet. If any UNSC ship enters this system, kill them." Sergeant Mason Carter knew what was coming. This was it. His team had no exit, no backup, no hope. Hundreds of Imperium soldiers closed in, their rifles raised. The tanks locked onto their position. And at the center of it all, General Marcus Kane watched. "You fought well," Kane called out, "but it's over." Carter gritted his teeth. His team was bleeding, low on ammo, exhausted. They weren't getting out of this, unless they made the Imperium bleed with them. Carter clicked his comm. "Vulture, if you got one last trick up your sleeve, now's the time." The sniper's voice crackled through the comm. "You're not gonna like this, Sarge." Carter blinked. "What do you mean?" Then, the sky exploded. "If we're going down, we're taking you with us." Location: orbit above. Erebus 4. The UNSC 3rd Fleet had arrived, but this wasn't a rescue. It was a funeral. Admiral Rourke watched from the bridge of the Relentless. His face was stone cold as he stared at the burning planet below. His fleet was outnumbered. The Imperium held the high ground, but Rourke didn't care. He wasn't here to win a battle. He was here to end a war. "Target the surface," Rourke ordered. The weapons officer stared. "Sir, our forces are still down there." Rourke didn't blink. "So are the traitors." A long pause. Then, fire. "Earth doesn't need two governments." Location: Erebus 4, battlefield. The sky turned to fire. Orbital kinetic rods streaked downward, slamming into Imperium fortifications. City blocks vanished in nuclear-level detonations. Shockwaves tore through the atmosphere, flattening entire battalions. The Imperium never saw it coming. They had expected a fight. They got an extinction-level event. Carter stared in disbelief. "Holy!" The first impact hit. The shockwave ripped through the battlefield, sending bodies flying, tanks flipping like toys. Kane's expression twisted into horror. "No!" Then the second wave hit, and the Imperium ceased to exist. Humanity united. Location: UNSC, High Command. Earth time: 1 week after the end of the war. The war was over. The Imperium was gone. Their fleets, their armies, their leaders, all erased in one final act of brutality. The galaxy watched in horror. But no one spoke against humanity, because they now understood the truth. There would be no second human empire, no rebellions, no civil wars. There was only one government, one law, one species, and it would never be challenged again. Epilogue. What comes next? Location: UNSC, Relentless, deep space. Admiral Rourke stood on the bridge, watching the stars. Vasquez approached. "Sir, the Imperium is gone. We won." Rourke exhaled. "We didn't win. We survived." Vasquez hesitated. "What now?" Rourke looked out into the void. "Now," he smiled. "Now we wait." He turned away from the viewport, and we let the rest of the galaxy wonder if they're next. That concludes this epic military sci-fi adventure. Humanity was underestimated. Humanity was pushed to the brink, and in response, humanity became the nightmare the galaxy will never forget. The Imperium thought they could rule. They thought Earth was weak. They thought wrong, because when you go to war with humans, you don't get a second chance. We don't negotiate, we don't conquer, we erase. Your mission, soldier. Like this story, let's create more legendary HFY tales. Share this with fellow sci-fi fans. Spread the word. Subscribe to HFY Genesis for more hardcore military sci-fi action. Humanity endures. The war drums beat on. See you in the next battle, soldier. Over and out. We are the storm. Blast off.